At the time of recording of this video, it's right now 3 a.m. on Friday, the 14th of May. And that's about, if you think about it, that's at least 3 weeks after the Chauvin verdict. But the reason why I'm talking about it today is because just recently it became relevant. And that's because it was announced that the accomplices or the accompanying officers that were there on the day would also be receiving sentences for aiding and abetting, which basically means that those officers will face similar sentences, which is either going to be between 10 to 15 years, unless they find aggravating factors, which means Chauvin could definitely face up to 30 years in prison. I have to point out two facts about the Chauvin case. Number one is that there was no evidence that this was a crime of racism. And number two is that, according to the autopsy report, there was no proof that showed Derek Chauvin's knee led to the death of George Floyd, aka there was no proof of strangulation. Instead, the autopsy report found that the George Floyd was high on 2 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, and I think it was almost 3 times actually. And it's enough to kill most men. So let's go over what charges were brought against Chauvin. First of all, second-degree murder, that's when intent is required. Third-degree murder, you don't have to have intent, but you have to show extreme negligence to life, and you basically have to go in there with no empathy, that kind of thing. And thirdly, there's manslaughter, which and all three charges he was found guilty of. And the other three officers who were there with him were found guilty of aiding and abetting. Aiding and abetting mostly relates to, hiring people, or there's like there's a conspiracy to commit murder or whatever. That's usually where there's aiding and abetting. There's usually has to be a plan and sort of intent. But I guess in some cases negligence and standing by could work. If we look into the three officers who were there with Chauvin that day, they are two out of three of them were actually trainees. Those officers were Thomas Lane and Alexander Keong. They were only on the job for 4 and 3 days respectively. And so if you have officers like that on the job, and they've only been on the job for 3-4 days, let's take another example. Like if those officers weren't police officers, but they were cashiers at KFC or something like that, and they had to learn the ropes of the job within, I don't know, however long, but it's definitely not, you're not going to learn all the ropes in 3-4 days. And imagine like someone is like choking to death at a KFC, like they've eaten a bit of chicken and they're choking on the bone, some weird stuff like that goes down. Would you expect those cashiers to save those people's lives? Would you expect them to know how to do the Heimlich maneuver and stuff like that? Like that's a lot of pressure you're putting on trainees. And so the fact that they're getting the aiding and abetting charge, and they're likely going to face 10 to 15 years in prison. How dare you? Now, returning to the Chauvin case, when it comes to Derek Chauvin alone, you could actually argue that justice was done a long time ago, because the family of George Floyd received $27 million. And this is a guy who was a felon, a drug addict. And you want to tell me, I mean, lives are priceless, right? But how do you dictate such a high figure, $27 million? It's an arbitrary payout when it comes to a wrongful death, of course, but 27 million, was George Floyd worth 27 million? No, of course not. Derek Chauvin, he lost his job, he got a divorce, even though when you look at that divorce is actually for making sure that his family doesn't lose all the assets in the case of a conviction. But even then, I mean, he lost his marriage, all that stuff. He will likely never work another job again. And, I mean, who's going to hire him? And then thirdly, I personally believe that, if he goes to jail for even a few years, that's more than enough. Because, I mean, if how cops are treated in prison, he's probably not going to come out alive. Like if he's put in with the rest of the general population, he's going to get, I don't know, shanked, or he's going to become someone's bitch. That's just how prison works. And I don't think cops are very welcome in prison. If you look at the surrounding circumstances of the legal proceedings, during the time of the case, there was a lot of rioters and protesters going around Wisconsin, and it was not a pretty sight. You had Maxine Waters come down to outside of the police station and give a speech.
We're looking for a guilty verdict. If nothing does not happen, then we know that we've got to not only stay in the street, but we've got to fight for justice. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
Outrage pouring in this morning after Congresswoman Maxine Waters appeared to incite protesters in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. The California Congresswoman breaking the local...
It's like implying that they should get more violent, and without actually saying it, of course. But very irresponsible for her to do, and you know, it was right that the Speaker of the House tried to censure her unsuccessfully. But it's just ridiculous what the Democrats were lobbying, and they were pressuring the jury to come to the right conclusion, and that's exactly what Biden did. It's really inconclusive that the knee of Derek Chauvin led to the death of George Floyd, if you look at the evidence. However, the prosecution did a nice job, and I'm saying this objectively, is that they did a nice job of showing by the end that they did prove that there was negligence, and police training when it comes to their department usually prepares them for this kind of thing. So Chauvin was definitely liable in the death of George Floyd, and I actually agree with some circumstances, either the manslaughter charge or the third degree charge, but you can't pin the second degree charge on him. There's simply no way. As God Saad points out, you know, I don't know if you know who he is. He's this originally a Lebanese immigrant who moved to Canada, and I believe he's a professor of evolutionary psychology, and he does this really nice episode on analyzing the case, and I'm not gonna lie, I learned a lot from just watching that. He points out that there's a clear case of deontological versus consequentialist ethics when it comes to the outcome of this case. The fact that Maxine Waters and Biden really pressured, as well as the violence occurring outside of the courthouse, implying that the jury could have faced severe consequences if they did not come to the right conclusion. So if the names of the jury were leaked, you know, that's it. They would be in the fear of their lives. So obviously they had to come to a guilty verdict, or else, you know, what's going to happen? The mob's going to screw them up. And so what God Saad meant by deontological versus consequentialist ethics, if you don't know what those words means, is basically deontological. It refers to adhering to the principles of something, like the principles of the U.S. legal system, which has due process, and to rely on deontological ethics in that case would be to let the court do the work, and, you know, not, you know, form a mob and let the mob dictate things. But however, consequentialist ethics is giving into the mob, like, for instance, coming to a guilty verdict to appease the mob and therefore saving your ass. And in any Western society, your legal system dies when you start adhering to consequentialist ethics rather than, you know, principles. And you need principles to, you know, to let your republic survive. And the U.S. is a republic, not an actual democracy, if you can't tell the difference between the two.
Here you have 1 year of violent rioting subsequent to the horrifying and tragic killing of George Floyd, and you have countless mobs saying if the correct verdict is not reached, cities will burn. So do you think on a scale of 0 to 100, where 100 they were maximally intimidated, 0 they weren't at all, what's the number that you're going to ascribe to how afraid those poor jury members were when they were deliberating? Certainly no intellectually honest, decent human being would say it's at 0. We can debate if it's at 100 or 95 or 90 or 80, but is this the type of society you want to live in?
Please check out God's Side. He's really amazing. If you don't know who he is, I have a link below to that very video that I watched. And yeah, like if you follow if you subscribe to him, I really recommend it. You could learn a lot. He's a really smart guy. So yeah, that really concludes my analysis of the case and whether in terms of facilitating the discussion, whether there was mob justice or there was true justice in the Chauvin case. I would argue there was mob justice, but if you disagree with me, I'd like you to comment down below on what part you disagree in terms of the verdict or whatever other part of the Chauvin case. And I would just like to add one more element to this before we conclude the video. If you look at anyone who believe that, if you look at anyone famous or anyone part of the left who concluded that there was in fact justice with this case, you can look at their tweets or whatever and you can see that they're not satisfied. Like, let's look at LeBron James. Immediately after the case, he says there's justice done, and then 2 days later, when a girl tries to stab someone else on April 22nd, I remember it, he tweeted out, "You're next," to the guy who shot the girl. And I think it was like the shooter of Mia Khalif, something like that. I'll have it like out in front of me when I'm talking right now. But yeah, and so it's proof that these people will never be satisfied. You can never just give in to the mob because they'll just eat you alive. And that's why I do this stuff. That's why I'm really passionate about this stuff. I want the mob to one day, I don't know, somehow calm down or, be defeated, even though that's kind of an unrealistic goal. Because I believe reason could save us, but who knows, maybe we're screwed and the whole world would be like a commie shitbag. So let's find out. So if you like hearing things from a red-pilled and chilled perspective, that's what the acronym of my channel stands for, then I recommend you subscribe because I've got a lot more videos on the way. And as I said before, I would like to try to do this weekly, even though I can't make a promise that I will, because sometimes I find myself just working too hard and I need to take a few days off and not, do research for a YouTube video like I try to do before everyone. So yeah, like the video if you enjoyed it and comment down below if you disagree with me. See you later.